Hey y'all, welcome back to Resilient and Rowdy. Today I have a special guest that I'm super excited to talk to, Olivera. She is a licensed therapist, yoga teacher, and business owner. So, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. This is super exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I saw that you recently opened up your own practice. So that just struck my interest. And being a young professional in the field, I feel like you've got some extensive experience. And I really want to get to know you and what brought you to open up your own practice and just how it's been going.
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, this was always part of the plan. I was really lucky where I just knew early on I wanted to be in the helping profession. It was just a matter of what exactly. And in Florida, we have what's called like advanced placement AP classes. And so ultimately, those are college level classes that you can take while you're in high school. And so at my school, we were given a presentation with all of the different AP professors, what they were teaching. And when the psychology professor came on stage, I was like, oh my God, I want to know everything that this man knows. And that just really ultimately ignited this passion. His name is Dr. Burns. I've talked about him before from Mitchell High School, and I just really attributed his class and his teaching style as helping me ignite that passion. And so I was born in St. Pete, Florida. Now my family did relocate to about an hour away in Pasco County, but I just remember daydreaming in Dr. Burns's class about the day I would finally move back to my hometown in St. Pete. I just felt this calling to be there. It just makes me so happy to be here. It's the Sunshine City, right? Sunshine State. And yeah, I just always imagined coming back and opening up my own private practice for therapy. And so ultimately, I went and pursued higher education. You have to have a master's degree. We go through, it's like residencies, like what doctors go through, where for 2 years after grad school, we're practicing therapists, but we have what's called a QS or a qualified supervisor. Mine was Nicole and Deli Paoli, and she still was like my mentor to this day. And so I met with her for the first two, mine was a little bit longer than 2 years, honestly. I've always done things at my own pace, but I would meet with her every week and we would just go over cases and just basically chatted about everything that it took to be a counselor. She was also my program manager at my first real like counseling position at an inpatient treatment facility in addiction. And so that's where I first started. And I have such a soft spot for that population. I think that they're so misunderstood. There are so many stigmas and misconceptions about addiction. And it's all a manifestation of some sort of deeper rooted presenting symptom, whether that be trauma, unresolved grief, lack of pro-social support, poverty. Of course, like we see a lot in veterans. I know that you're a veteran yourself, which by the way, thank you so much for your service. There are just so many different things that can cause addiction. And so I started there. And ultimately the beginning of my career, I was just trying to like explore different fields of psychology and therapy, see what I liked, what I didn't like, just to make sure that opening a private practice was what I truly wanted and what I had the passion and skill set for. And so I did several years there at the inpatient treatment center. Then I switched over to a psychiatric hospital where I worked with people with really severe psychosis, mood disorders like bipolar, yes, of course, trauma and no other things. I've always loved inpatient levels of care just because it's so complex. And I just really take a holistic approach and focus on getting to the root cause of a problem and effectively resolving that. So after the inpatient hospital, I then went to a group practice to do contract work as a psychotherapist, meeting with clients one on one, actually doing more individual sessions rather than some individuals and groups and other things like case management. And I loved it. I just blossomed. My skill set grew. I felt more and more confident. And then ultimately, I opened up my practice in 2024 And it's crazy because that year, I always sit in January just to set some goals for the years, and opening up a practice was always the plan, but it wasn't in 2024. But I started doing this thing where I followed the glimmers in life. So glimmers are opposite of triggers. These are people, places, events that just bring joy, passion, excitement. And the glimmers led me to filing for my LLC March 18th. It was like a big astrological event. At that time, it was very like just a big sign, like this is the time to do it. And then I did. And I've been doing it ever since. So I specialize in trauma and grief, really focusing on taking a somatic based approach to healing, while a lot of traditional modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy, while it can work and it's definitely helpful, you can't really think your way out of trauma. You can learn tools and skills and shift your perspective, but ultimately we store trauma in the body. There's a book that's called The Body Keeps the Score that talks a lot about that. And we really want to process that out too. This could be through yoga. And so that's why I really incorporate a huge mindfulness component with my clients, but also accelerated resolution therapy, which I know we'll get to as we have our conversation, but really just processing out the memories, the emotions, the stress that we store in our body and just feel lighter. So, yeah, I look at a lot of different things when I'm helping someone. I do a complete biopsychosocial assessment when I first meet them. So I examine like their medical history, their mental health history, what worked, what didn't work, what their lifestyle is like in terms of habits, activity, like exercise, diet. I really see a lot of hormonal imbalances, especially in women. So looking at that. And so I will refer clients out to a network that I've been developing over the course of my career for other professionals that have also run some further testing and examine like what also is happening. And then teaching coping skills, little tricks for your brain, and then processing and resolving the root cause, which oftentimes can be trauma. And I really focus on attachment theory. So how we connect to one another, like what our predominant attachment style is, oftentimes that shows up in relationships and can be a manifestation of these different symptoms like anxiety, depression, things of that nature. So, yeah, like in a nutshell, that's a little brief synopsis about my work.
That's amazing, Olivera. I am inspired and moved with just how
Oh,
sure you were with getting into this field, like from high school and committing to that because you're in your early 30s, right?
correct. Yeah,
So there's a lot of like personal and professional, like big changes throughout those years. And so you stuck to
absolutely.
it. And I think I'd like to say that it helped by you checking out all the different options that you had.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's a really smart approach to go at it. But like my thing is just like the persistence and like how sure you were with that. Like I sincerely just love that so much because I know I personally have a lot of doubts. I question myself all the time. So when I see somebody that's just really sure and certain. I just love that. And I think it really adds to your commitment of this calling that you have. And clearly you're very talented at it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And also, I'm just so proud of you for taking the leap. That's a big step. So I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. And I don't want to lie and say there were definitely not periods of some doubt. I think that it's normal to be doubtful. Usually it means that you care. And especially in our teens and 20s, it's normal to question and explore where do we fit in life. And there was actually a period in the inpatient treatment center for addiction where I remember being surrounded by my mentor, my team that I was a part of, and like the doctors. And I was just listening, right? And I was like, dang, can I be on this level? Like, I just feel like an imposter. Is this really where I'm meant to be? And ultimately, it was just some insecurity. A lot of therapists, and I think people overall in their 20s have a lot of that imposter syndrome where it's like, you got the degree, you know all the terms, but now you have to apply it. And that's also different. Maybe someone is really good at regurgitating facts, but not so much in the application. And so confidence comes from experiences, right? Showing ourselves that we can do something and get better. And I also think that because of that, because I was able to get better and just being surrounded by the right support system. So, Nicole, my mentor that I talk so highly of, she just really shaped me. She saw my potential, she saw my strengths and my weaknesses, and she helped me overcome that. And same thing with my support system. So, my significant other, we've been together since I was 20. We were both 20 actually, to high school together. So, he's
Wow.
just been through it all and just always was just encouraging me and being there and letting me break down and flip out, and also celebrating all of my wins along the way. Same thing with my family. So it really does help to be surrounded by people that can lift you up. But I also am very stubborn,
Mm.
which can be a good and bad thing. And when I set my mind on something that I'm very sure of, I don't care how it happens. It will usually be at my own pace. My parents used to always tell them that to me about me. Like, I was always a late bloomer. I just did it at my own pace, everything. And so just learning to accept that, like not measuring success off of, am I doing or achieving all of these milestones in the same time period as everyone else?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter. Am I achieving it for me? Do I say what I mean and mean what I say and follow through with that? And I do. It just doesn't always look like everyone else.
That's a really important reminder. I know I personally love hearing that. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I feel like the comparison game, especially with social media and everything these days, is a huge problem and it adds unnecessary stress. Now, when like myself and my listeners are listening to you speak about and using these keywords like somatic and holistic, some people don't know what that
Yeah,
means. And there might be some misunderstanding with what it means. I know you did touch a little bit about somatic, but
sure.
when you're talking about holistic approaches, especially with the mental health movement evolving as it has, and how you focus on non-traditional modalities. I really like that, because I'm sure that a lot of folks do try the traditional route and they do get frustrated when it's just not necessarily as effective. And I'm sure there's a little bit of impatience because you just want to feel better, right? So
Sure.
when you and other professionals are in this space of holistic approaches, what exactly does that mean? Can you break it down like Barney style?
Yeah. So holistic, when I also think of holistic, I think of integrative. So integrating all of these different aspects of our life. Spirituality is also another huge part of that I don't think I touched up on when I was talking about the biopsychosocial assessment. But ultimately is just exploring and understanding all of the different parts of us, all of the different factors of wellness, from our support system to our health, to our career, our environment, and just bringing all of that together and healing all of those different parts, addressing all of those different parts. Healing never ends. I don't want to ever present it like it's this like end all, like hard stop. We are always going to be working on ourselves and evolving and transforming. I try to be transparent about that with my clients. It's like, yes, I'm the expert. I live and breathe this stuff, but I also am always growing and evolving and mess up too along the way. We learn from our experiences. And so, yeah, it's just incorporating all of the different aspects of our life into our wellness, from our mental to our physical to our spirituality and everything in between. And then somatic being essentially body work. So it's like, where do you feel an emotion? Where do you feel it in your body? When was the first time you remember feeling this way? What was going on around that time? Oftentimes, there are patterns and similarities that we subconsciously repeat, and our body plays a huge role in that. Sometimes we want to avoid the discomfort, the uncomfortable feelings or the painful ones, but when we can actually learn how to coexist with them and stop and listen, our body actually communicates a lot of the time. So one of the things I even started doing for myself that I encourage clients to do as well is, when I practice yoga, I will keep a journal with me. And oftentimes when you're in different poses, let's just say pigeon pose, which is a very deep hip opener, maybe you start to feel sad or grief out of the blue. Maybe you start thinking about this one person, or this fear that you have comes up. And then the more and more you log it, you might start to notice that every time you're in a hip opener, the same memory gets activated, or the same core belief, right? Or the same fear. And so maybe that's just a sign that our body is storing it in that way. Oftentimes we do store trauma in our hips. Shoulders can be another area, but Really, we can store it anywhere in our body, from our throat to our head to our hands. And so it's individual for everyone. And it's just learning how to explore that, breathe through it. When we learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions, like in a yoga practice, that can then translate to sitting through an uncomfortable situation, like a difficult meeting with a boss, for instance. So it's like translating these different insights or skills on the yoga mat or in a therapy session outside.
I really like that because I feel like a lot of people can see, whether in themselves and others, how their experiences affect them daily and it seeps into everything. So, your anxiety, for example, can seep into everything, your conversations, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to others, how you handle stressful situations, like you said, like meeting with your boss. And so, I think people forget that because you're going to therapy and having those conversations about maybe experiences or just how you're feeling, that it's not just about the experience that you had or what you're experiencing now. It's just how you can carry yourself through life. So that was a really beautiful explanation of how it can help you grow in so many other ways. And I really like the emphasis that you had about evolving and making mistakes, but getting back up and trying again. I think with how the mental health movement has been, I don't know, I guess monetized. You're healed and you're done and it sells well, but really what realistically happens, like you said, is you're always healing.
Exactly. And I tell this to clients all the time, usually in that first initial session or the consultation that I do. I work for the day where you don't need therapy. Yes, healing is lifelong and always evolving, but part of my goal is that like I will empower that client that is sitting with me to be able to have the skills to be able to ask themselves the same questions that I'm asking them, basically to teach them how to, in a way, be their own therapist so that they don't have to form this dependence on therapy, because that can absolutely happen too. And that's something that I think we absolutely need to be mindful about as clinicians, is ensuring that we're not fostering or just even noticing this dependence on therapy. Like, it's okay. And I encourage clients all the time, take a break from therapy. You can always come back in the future. Let's say if you need that support. I know some people do like to have some maintenance sessions, maybe monthly or quarterly, just to check in. You go and meet with a chiropractor for adjustments or a massage therapist. It can be helpful to have that safe space with a therapist to just talk about something unfiltered. And that's fine. It's just we don't want to create that dependence where it's like you need that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to be okay.
Yeah. And I do like that, like you said, like developing the skills. And I had a therapist tell me, like, they're basically like giving me tools to put in my toolbox to
Yeah.
take care of myself if we're no longer in therapy together and just to progress in life. And I really that you mentioned that the dependency of being stuck in therapy or feeling like you're stuck in therapy, feeling like you have to be in therapy and taking those breaks, I think is really important because you need to be able to give yourself the chance to apply it in
Yep.
life and also just see how you can go throughout your days, take those training wheels off and just build that confidence. And I think that's like the best glow up is like getting that confidence of, okay, I learned it, I'm applying it. Yeah, I might fall off my bike, but I'm going to get back up and try again. I really like these approaches. Again, as someone who did the traditional therapy and now is looking more towards something a little more different, just because sometimes I feel like you can outgrow certain modalities, right?
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
That definitely happened. When I share about client stories, by the way, I change some things around. I always keep it anonymous, HIPAA
Right.
compliant. Oftentimes they do give me permission to share their story, but still just like that little disclaimer there. But I had this one client that just had a really severe case of CPTSD. And she was working with a therapist, and the therapist was wonderful. And I collaborated with this therapist, but she needed more like somatic work, trauma therapy. At the time I was doing EMDR only. I now just do accelerated resolution therapy, which we'll talk about. And so she just needed that trauma therapy aspect of it. And so we were doing our work and she was progressing and meeting her treatment plan goals. But we got to this place where it's like, her therapist was wonderful, but the modality that the therapist was really specializing in, that she primarily did, my client just had outgrown that. And so I normalized that. We were still in the middle of some trauma work. And so I just like suggested or asked her, like, what do you think about a full practice transfer and just meeting with me overall? Because it's not really ethical to have two therapists, but I was just doing EMDR with her. And then she was still meeting with her primary therapist. And so because her therapist didn't do EMDR and I only stayed in my lane with EMDR with her, and
Okay.
anything else beyond that, I'd be like, go bring this to your primary
Right.
therapist. But yeah, ultimately she was like, yeah, I was thinking about that. And it was very helpful because it also normalized like ending a relationship, which can be
Mhm.
hard for a lot of people to do. And it was a positive closure. So it was just very beneficial for her. And yeah, she was doing great with that therapist, but she just needed more of somatic approaches, more mindfulness practices, more group therapies. So I actually offer a free support group. I combine yoga with group therapy. So I have different mindfulness events. So she just needed some other things that therapist didn't provide. And
Right.
so it was just a really therapeutic transfer for her. And
Yeah.
she's just like meeting her treatment plan goals in a way that she never has before.
Oh, I love that. I really appreciate hearing that because unfortunately, sometimes traditional therapy, in my experience, is mostly with military mental health and the
Yes.
VA mental health. And so they're very rigid. They stick to
Yep.
what they are told to do. And so seeing you meet with your client and just really evaluate what they need, what they're working on, like really integrating everything is obviously the best approach. It's very well rounded. And so that way you really get to everything. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that healing needs to be individualized. And so it's definitely not a set one size fits all. And I really try to either help the client notice their strengths or just validate their strengths and like
Mhm.
use that to their advantage. So I have this other client that is multilingual and loves learning different languages. And then I was actually incorporating some homework assignments in that language that she's learning. And like we were basically able to use this hobby of hers as a way to really accelerate a lot of her progress. And so I think that it needs to be individualized. And I love being able to foster that. And the same thing I tell clients, it's like, you might outgrow me one day, and that's
Mhm.
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Feel comfortable to tell me that. If you need help to find another therapist, I will absolutely help you with that. I have a network. If you want to do it solo, it's totally up to you, but just want to normalize that. We outgrow relationships all the time, including the
Right.
therapeutic one.
I love that. I'm really grateful to just see this in this mental health space so much. One last thing that I wanted to ask you before we get into ART,
Sure.
how do you help clients transition into this different approach? Like maybe unlearn some of the things that they had in the past, but if they had done traditional therapy and they're unsure, they just want to give it a chance. Like, how do you make them feel comfortable and welcomed into a new environment? Because that can be a big transition.
Yeah, I'm pausing just because there's never like a one size approach. It's
True. Yes.
definitely like dependent on the client. A
Yeah.
lot of the time, truthfully, clients will seek me out because I offer like more holistic, integrative care. So oftentimes there usually is that level of motivation already present
Okay.
that I will just foster. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's not though, especially when I worked at like a treatment center, either the hospital or the addiction treatment center, where maybe they were there for more traditional approaches and that's all they knew. And so one,
Mm.
I meet people where they're at. If that's what they want, if that's what they're gravitating towards, there are definitely benefits of that. But like with anything, outline the pros and the cons. And that also includes some of the more holistic options like going non-medication. Ultimately, yes, I market and practice as a holistic therapist. I try to also, as much as I can, put my own biases aside. Like it's not about what I want for the client. It's what does the client want? And so I meet them where they're at. And again, just outlining pros and cons, providing a lot of psychoeducation and explanation. I incorporate a lot of neuroscience. Like when I validate someone with maybe something that they're struggling with that they can't get out of, I will explain like what is happening in the brain and why it's so hard for you to change. Like I'll get to the nitty gritty of it. And so just a lot of education while also balancing like meeting them where they're at and validating that. I think I do a pretty good job of that.
I'm sorry. I know that question can be like a little
Oh, you're totally fine.
just blanket, but I do like that you said that you do individualized and prefer to do that. So
Yeah.
it's just more of, I'm glad that you mentioned that people are already curious when they reach out to you. So it's like the curiosity is there, and the environment that you've built and even just your presence is very warm, welcome, professional, and kind. And like you said, you put your biases aside and you listen to your client. And that can be just so huge, especially in given certain backgrounds. A lot of people don't feel like they're heard by their therapist or their psychiatrist.
I see that and I hear that too. One thing I'm really lucky is I grew up with a very strong multicultural lens. I come from a family of immigrants from Eastern Europe, has that collectivist culture. I traveled a lot growing up, met people from all different backgrounds and walks of life. And so I just already aligned with that. And so it's just very easy for me to already do that and just be accepting. It doesn't matter what background, religion, race, being mindful about that though. And so there's this technique called broaching that I try to do with clients that come from maybe a different nationality or culture or race. I say, hey, I come from my perspective. If I get it sometimes wrong, please know that you can correct me and let me know. And the research shows that when you do that actually as a therapist, that like really strengthens that therapeutic relationship. And truthfully, I tell this to everyone, the most important thing about therapy, the single one predictor for successful outcomes, it's not the modality, it's the therapeutic relationship. Do you feel connected with their therapist? Do you feel like they're listening, that they care, that they're invested in your progress? And another huge aspect of that is of course, I'm human, but to my best ability, I just stay regulated in session. I'm calm, I'm collected. There comes to a point early in our career where nothing can really shock us at any point. We get desensitized really fast. But as clients have told me, like, you have a poker face, like I can say the most like craziest thing and you like just won't make an expression. And I do express myself, being mindful of when and where. And so just staying calm, because there's something called co-regulation where when you connect with someone just emotionally, energetically, and they're calm, it's like you're borrowing their calm. And so you can feel that calm. And so it's so good to hear that my warmth and calm is felt. I hope that it does, because that's really important. We can only heal in safe spaces. We're like plants. We need the right environments to heal. And when you're in session with a therapist that is invested, that is able to stay calm and grounded, that can help you, that changes like the emotional charge of whatever, let's say the memory that you're processing or talking about, or the presenting problem you're exploring. The more and more you start to maybe feel calm or neutrally, or even differently, maybe you went from feeling anxious to now angry, that's normal too, that just starts to change the way you feel about the memory over time. And so maybe before, when you talked about this really painful memory, of course it hurt. And maybe when you talked about with your friends, family, or maybe another therapist that wasn't able to be supportive and you were met with shame or you were just dismissed, that can be harmful on the flip side. And so I think it's just so important to be able to like co-regulate with clients in that way. And also as a yoga teacher too.
That's huge. I'm really excited to see how your practice and even like yourself as a professional is going to thrive now that you have your own space to really like harvest that environment. And yeah, personally, I just love to see that. I wish I could go to you in Florida, but
Yeah. If I meet someone in Georgia, I will definitely refer you to them. Yeah.
yes. Okay, that could be really cool. So if people do have interest, I know that you're limited with your practice being in Florida, but I'm sure that you're building that network of, hey, look, I'm not licensed in that state, but let me recommend you to this person. So building that network is huge, because we definitely need more of this for sure.
This has been in legislature for a while, but they're actually trying to initiate what's called the Counseling Compact. Florida signed into it. A lot of the states actually did, but basically, if your state signed into this Counseling Compact, then you can ethically see clients from a different state as long as they're all a part of that Counseling Compact. So I think that there's going to be an update about that soon. I want to say next year. Don't quote me on that though. So hopefully that will change. But if, let's say, someone from out of state wanted to do an ART session with me, accelerated resolution therapy, right? That's just one session. So as long as they're in Florida at the time, because that's in person, like that can work. Or if someone wanted to, let's say, come to my yoga events or yoga classes while they're visiting Florida, that's fine. So yeah, There's a little bit of a gray area with that, especially because I'm also a yoga teacher and I do guided meditation as well. So sometimes when my clients travel, I can't see them for therapy, but it'll be like, hey, we can just do yoga or a guided meditation if you're open to that, if you want that appointment. Some people don't, some
Mhm.
people do.
Oh,
So there
wow.
are a little bit of workarounds
Yeah.
around.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad that you're very flexible with that, but definitely keep me in the loop if that
For sure.
legislation does come out. Now, okay, so you mentioned ART. Now, for my listeners, I know that y'all have heard of EMDR. So, Olivera, if you can dive into the craze of EMDR and then how ART comes into play and
Absolutely.
why you chose to specialize in that.
Yes. So, like I mentioned, I am trained in both EMDR and ART. EMDR is wonderful and it's helped a lot of my clients, but it does have some limitations that I've quickly, quickly noticed. So, really quickly, EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing therapy. Ultimately, that utilizes eye movements to help a client desensitize from a trigger, which is often connected to a painful memory. And so there's a lot of free association, meaning the client just comes into that session and then you do some eye movement sets and you see what comes up. And then you just go with that, process that with eye movements. So ultimately, the eye movements are really soothing and it can help essentially almost like erase that emotional charge with that memory. ART was born from EMDR. And so it utilizes the same movements, but that's the main thing where they're the same. ART is more directive, it's more structured. And so the therapist will help the client basically identify what's called like the scene, which is like that root cause, that memory, right? So let's just use like physical abuse as an example. Maybe it was a one time event, oftentimes a series of events. So you pick the top three, and that's your scene. And so ultimately, how ART works is after identifying that scene, we play out that scene from start to finish. I move my hand back and forth. The client follows it, keeping their head still with their eyes. And so they're replaying that memory. And then we pause and then we check in. Okay, what's coming up for you in the body? Let's just say tightness in my chest. Okay, now we're just going to process that tightness in your chest. And what is so cool is like that sensation will drop. It might go away altogether. It might be a lot more mild. And so you can stay there processing that emotion in the body as long as the client wants. Ultimately, they choose, do they want to keep processing that emotion or sensation or process their scene again? So we go back and forth a couple of times, scene, body. Why we're processing the scene is because ultimately trauma is like a failed memory processing. Trauma impacts our brain. And so the brain couldn't process the traumatic event because it was just so shocking or whatever. And so now we're letting the brain process what it couldn't. Then, this is the really important piece. We create a new scene to replace that original painful memory. So, maybe in the case of like physical abuse, maybe we now want to remember that person never abused us. Maybe we never met that person. Maybe we had a different parent, right? We can change this scene. And then we play out this new scene with the eye movement sets. And then we pause and check in with the body. And then we process positive sensations. So maybe they feel positive or neutrally about that new scene now. And so we just spread that all throughout the body with the eye movement sense. And we do that a couple of times and we just strengthen the new image with the eye movement sense. You will always know that the new memory is fictional. You will always know that the old one actually happened. But what should happen after ART is that when you immediately think about that traumatic memory, your new image comes up. And then there's like a section where we test like future triggers, process out any negative sensations with that. This is all completed in one session. I typically block off 2 hours for this. In the training, they say 90 minutes minimum. Some clients, depending on, just individual factors, they can go through the therapy in 45 minutes. Some people need the full 2 hours. It really just depends. And the research shows in 1 to 5 sessions is what on average is needed for a singular issue. And so more often than not, it's one session I've so far never had a client need more than one session for a singular topic. I know that a lot of the studies I've read on like PTSD veterans, the average was 4 for them, but it's just way more effective. So it uses the same eye movements as EMDR, but EMDR typically takes 6 to 12 sessions to work. EMDR does not as effectively resolve the trauma. I've noticed this with my clients as well as me personally when I've gone through the therapy of both. When I did the ART training, something came up that I thought I'd work through. And it turns out it wasn't quite fully resolved. And then I was able to completely resolve that just from that training session of ART. Because like we go through the actual, like all of the steps. And so it's very structured. And oftentimes with EMDR, one, it's like there's not that much closure. It's like you do what you can in that 60-minute session, and then you set up like a happy place and a container to close the session off, but it's not fully closed off. And so it's very emotionally raw for a lot of people. It's what I've always described as it gets worse before it gets better. And it requires the client to follow through every week, basically. Didn't do EMDR like bi-weekly or monthly. Like you needed to do it weekly. And it would take time and it still wouldn't like completely resolve everything even at the end. It helped a lot, which was helpful and amazing for many people. And so when I switched over to ART, got that training, I was just basically like telling my clients that I was still saying that I was doing EMDR. I'm like, look, here's this new modality, here's what it is. I even did like eye movement sets on them in the moment just so that they can see that sensation drop immediately. And I was like, I'm switching to this modality. If you still want to do EMDR, I will still do it with you because I know that's what like you found me for that. You're choosing to work with me for that, but I really don't think that you're going to want to after that. And pretty much all of them either successfully completed therapy after that ART session, just wrapped everything up, or they just were like, I'm going to just meet with you quarterly now. We'd already done all of the other work. And so that was just, let's wrap this up, put a little bow on it and go on. And so it's not one of those, I don't ever want to present it like this is like a cure, like you don't ever need therapy after this one session. Like I don't just do ART as a standalone treatment option. I know that there are some therapists that do. I just don't. I just looking at it holistically. There's so many different layers to health and wellness. And so usually there are other things that we want to work on, or at least just focus on integrating these changes. And so I'm very rigid and I'm a big follower of fidelity of the model. And so you're not supposed to do this modality virtually. People do. There are many reasons too why, safety reasons, right? The client could just shut the laptop off and then just walk away. And now they're like open. Maybe if they're suicidal, are they going to now like hurt themselves? Whereas in the office, I can just, okay, you want to stop? Let's do some eye movement sets. And then you can stop. Like, we're just going to dissolve that. And then they feel better and they want to continue, right? So there's that closure. Also to technology, right? Technology freezes, it glitches, you have problems, it lags. Like you really don't want any sort of delay. It just wants to be a seamless fluid therapy session. And the one really cool thing, just quickly unrelated, but ART doesn't require you to talk because it's so structured. You just need to know as a therapist, like what's the presenting problem? Do they have the scene? They don't have to share anything. So that's really cool. I just wanted to throw that in there because I know it could be traumatizing to talk about our trauma, right? So I need to know all the details. If you want to share, cool, but it's not necessary. And so in ART, we're really, I always tell clients like, this is not a talking session. So this is just processing. So it has so many benefits, right? Because rather than paying whatever, $200, EMDR, 6 to 12, and then usually therapy before and after, it's okay, here's this one ART session. I price at $300, it's about 2 hours, right? And that's it. So it saves clients time, it saves clients money. Not everyone can commit to something weekly because of their own schedules. It's a lot to navigate really intense trauma symptoms while you work or have kids that you need to take care of. It's just like life responsibilities. And so they're just way more benefits to ART. And so I just switched modalities entirely. And I'm just really passionate about just spreading the knowledge of this modality because I think it can help a lot of people. And EMDR is still recommended, I think, just because people don't know about this. And so that's why I was so happy that you invited me to your podcast because you have the audience, right? And you have the microphone. So I'm just like, here, let your viewers know about this and they could spread the word, right? And people can actually start to get better. It's just so powerful. You just have to experience it for yourself to
Yeah.
really know, but it's just so helpful. I've seen
Mm.
scores drop from like severe PTSD, depression, anxiety, and maybe with EMDR it was like moderate because I do screenings with my clients.
Right.
And then after that ART session, it's all none to minimal. It's just so incredible to see and to just be a part of that and help people literally erase the worst memories of their life to be able to
Mhm.
in a balanced and calm nervous system. Like it just is so incredible. That's why we do what we do as
Yeah.
therapists. Help
Yeah.
people
That's
just feel.
amazing. And I'm really like appreciative of just you keeping it honest and realistic. Like you said, some clients are good in one session and then the emphasis on PTSD, especially veterans, it'll take a few sessions. So I think that honesty is really appreciated, especially in this space. And I really like hearing that, like just how effective it is. Is this a fairly new thing? Because honestly, I've heard of
Yeah.
EMDR like a lot the past like 5, 10 years. Now, I can't say the same about ART. So is
Yep.
it a recent something
Newer,
that has
definitely.
been
So I think EMDR came about from hypnotherapy in like the 1980s. And then
Mhm.
Lainey is the creator of ART. She was trained in EMDR, saw limitations, the same limitations that a lot of us see that we switch, those who've switched from EMDR to ART. So she created this newer therapy from EMDR in 2008, I want to say. Fact check me on that, but that's what I believe. And she actually basically, I think it achieved evidence-based status like in the 2010s, I want to say. So it was studied. It's valid, the research reliable. I think actually a lot of the studies were done at my university at USF, University of
That's
South Florida in
so
St. Pete
cool.
specifically. So that was pretty cool when I learned that. So it is evidence based, and I probably should have led with that because it sounds so good to be true, and a lot of people are skeptical. Of course, it's normal to be, but no, it's been tested. And so it is newer. And I think
Mhm.
that's, of course, why we don't hear a lot about it compared to other modalities that have been around a lot longer. But yeah, it is just as effective, and the research shows higher levels of client outcome success as compared to EMDR. Guarantee is not just Florida though. So this is all throughout the United States. And so if you go to the official website, I can send it to you after so you can just link it to the bio. You can actually search for an ART therapist in your area. So they have trainings all throughout the United States. I think they even now have some trainings over internationally. So it's starting to spread. It's just a newer modality, but I think it's a new modality that we all need to know about and talk about.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned that you don't have to talk during this. I
Yeah.
think that, especially I'm thinking like kids and people who are severely traumatized, that for some people, even just it's enough to think about it. And then it's one thing to put the words out and share that with someone. So I'm thinking of that demographic that just it might not be ready to share, but really need to help process that, especially young people, young kids. So I love hearing that, just how effective just some changes can be
Yeah.
and do.
And you can do this therapy on kids. The eye movement sets are a little bit shorter just to
Mm.
take account for their attention spans, right? But if you can hold a thought, if you can visualize something, and I say this with an asterisk, I'll get to that in a second, like you can do ART. ART is not just for trauma, though. It could be
Mm.
used for substance abuse. It could be used for eating disorders. It could be used for phobias, for anxiety. So it's not just trauma. I've done it for grief too. So oftentimes there usually is some sort of trauma component to all of these different symptoms, but
Right.
you can do it on a whole bunch of other different things. So it's not just PTSD.
Yeah.
And even if, because I know some people can't visualize in their mind an image
Mm.
or memory,
Mm.
even if you just narrate it in your mind, like in bullets, like you're
Mhm.
telling a story, that is just as effective. So when I was doing my training, my classmate, he told me, he's like, hey, I'm not going to be able to visualize anything, just disclaimer. So we'll narrate it. I'm like, cool. And like when he narrated, it was just in his mind. He didn't have to say anything out loud. So that was also pretty cool. And yeah, no matter how supported you feel by your therapist, how much you trust them, it's still hard to share some of these very painful memories. So I don't take it into any type of way. I don't take it personally. If a client can't do that, I understand. And that's where I think that this therapy really does help is you don't have to. I've done ART sessions where I had no clue what they were saying. I mean, kind of, because I'm their therapist and I knew more or less what was going on, but I didn't need to know either. And yeah, it was just so effective. Another client that I recently did ART on, and she gave me permission to share as needed, but really severe sexual abuse. And so that was really all I needed to know. We went through a timeline and it was like she scored it like because in the beginning of ART, you do like a check-in. What do you feel? Where do you feel in the body? Rate that on a scale of 0 to 10. It was 10 out of 10. She actually threw up when we were processing it. And it was, I think, all that trauma she was storing. Ended the therapy session 0 out of 10
Oh my God.
from the worst thing in her life that she has never been able to even share about with me. Otherwise, she was always like really open and would share everything, but this was that one where she just couldn't. And
Mm.
so I would bring it up periodically because I've been working with this client for a couple of years. And so I'm like, hey, do you think you're ready to confront this? No? Okay, that's okay. Tell me why. And so ultimately, I helped her work through getting to that motivation to confront that, and she finally did. So I'll like work through that. It's called stages of change. You help clients go through those different stages without pushing it, balancing, meeting them where they're at, and then ultimately we did that, and it's just night and day difference.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I love hearing that. I'm so proud of you and of
Thank
her.
you.
Just, yeah. And also, I want to highlight how you mentioned the ethics of ART and in general the work, how you said technology issues and someone could just shut the laptop and just walk away and you have no way to just ground them and centered.
You need
I
to bring them into safety.
Yeah, that's really great.
And one thing I want to add, because unfortunately there are therapists that don't follow the fidelity of the model. And I think that if you are presenting something as evidence-based, you need to be presenting it and facilitating it in a way that has been tested through research. And so the research shows that you typically need 90-minute sessions. So we have, unfortunately, therapists that are doing ART in 60-minute sessions. And I understand why. It's because of insurance. Insurance does not bill 90-minute sessions. So I understand why they're doing that, but also at the same time, truthfully, that's why I don't bill insurance. So I don't take insurance is
Yeah.
one of the reasons is because of this. Like this is something that I offer, and we're not going to be able to. We're going to have to go the self-pay route at least for this session. And so they do it in 60 minutes. They might do it virtually, and it's just not enough time. And I've heard some stories where 60 minutes wasn't enough time for the clients to go through and process all of the steps in that therapy, and so they had to end session, and they
Mm.
then left session in the middle, feeling dysregulated, feeling unsafe, and that's just not effective. And so it can actually be harmful. And so I always like part of like my mission with spreading the word of this therapy modality. I'm not trying to talk down to other people, but like don't meet with that therapist if they do it all in a 50 or 60-minute session. Don't run the other way if it's offered virtually. That can be unsafe. I know a lot of people, I'm like the outlier, a lot of people don't see it this way, but this is just what I believe to be true, what I believe is
Mm.
the ethical way. And so that's what I'm going to recommend to my clients, your audience. I just think it's really, I'm very passionate about the ethics of therapy.
Absolutely.
And with a
I'm
vulnerable population, we need to have
great.
strong boundaries
Yeah.
and strong ethics. So
100%. Yeah. Just, oh my God. Don't get me started on insurance companies and that whole monopoly.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. But anywho, thank you so much for just like really diving into this new beneficial treatment that people can do. So I'm excited to hear what the audience is going to say about that. Now, one thing that I want to ask you to wrap this up is in your personal or your professional experiences, what does resilience look like to you?
That's such a good question. I'm going to pause because I want to really think about this before I answer. Resilience to me is adapting and not giving up. It's like maybe it's not the absence of a struggle, because I think some of the most resilient people have struggled tremendously in their life. It's about just keep trying and pushing through. And if one way is not working, being creative and finding another way, not giving up on hope, which I think it can be normal to experience a period of hopelessness, because I know I've definitely felt that way, but then finding it again, being empowered and just keep pushing forward, I
Mhm.
guess is how I would define it.
That's beautiful. Thank you,
What about
Olivia.
you? I want to hear your take because I know this is like the Resilient and Rowdy podcast.
Honestly, I couldn't agree more. Of sounds very simple, but in all of my different eras and chapters of life, sometimes keeping it simple is what is the most effective. It's having that glimmer of hope, like how you mentioned earlier, those glimmers.
Yeah.
And so, even in my most broken and lost chapters, there's a couple chapters of that.
Yeah.
It's just, no, this isn't forever. What can I do to get me
Hmm.
out of this mental and physical space? And it's just never giving up on me. Even in the brokenness, I'm like, no, I don't think my journey was to give up. So
Yeah.
I have to keep going. And resilience to me is, I think, accountability, ownership, honesty, and just doing what feels right to me. Like how you mentioned earlier, the comparison game. Sometimes, especially in the survivor world, and I can apply that in multiple aspects. So, childhood abuse survivors, military sexual assault survivors, we often look at other people for inspiration and light when really we should be looking in the mirror because we are our own embodiment of resilience. If we're still here, we're resilient. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So thank you for
One
asking.
lesson with resilience that I recently had to learn, that I had my support system very kindly and compassionately point out. Accountability, I think, is a huge piece. Side note, like I think it's important to surround yourself with people that can also point out areas that you're struggling
Mhm.
with. But they showed me that I always get into this mood of, I need to fix this. I'm experiencing something uncomfortable for myself. What's the solution? How do I get out of this? And yes, it's important. It's also learning how to support yourself and just be in the moment. Like
Yeah.
sometimes life just sucks, period. And it will end and you will find a way out. But it's also okay to sit there and to support yourself or seek support from other people too while you're there. You don't always need to be fixed at every single moment. It's okay to sometimes be sad and to feel
Yeah.
hopeless, knowing that it's temporary and it will pass and you're just riding the wave. I always
Mhm.
relate it is like through yin yoga. When you hold a pose, a restorative pose, deep stretch for 2 to 5 minutes, right? Sometimes it feels uncomfortable and you just breathe
Mhm.
through it. So it's like the same thing. An emotion might be very uncomfortable or a situation, and so it's learning how to just breathe through it too sometimes.
Oh, yes, 100%. And that was something that, in a similar way, had to really hone in on is you'll feel better if you do this. So, holding
Yeah.
that pose, taking care of yourself, basic hygiene, forcing yourself to do those mundane household tasks, going to the gym. It always ends with you'll feel better if you do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Olivera, thank you so much for your time and your light and your knowledge in this really awesome evolving space. If people want to reach out to you and get in touch with you or just see what you're up to, how could they connect with you?
My website or my business Instagram. My website's oliveracounseling.com. Instagram handle Olivera Counseling. It matches. That's where you're going to find the most updates. All about me, all of the different services that I offer, working on some other things like a blog and a YouTube channel for like yoga and guided meditation, other psychoeducational tidbits that's in the works. So that would be the best place to really just be updated with what I'm doing. If you are a person, an adult, I only work with adults, but I'm always happy to refer out to other therapists who specialize in adolescents or kids. But if you are an adult and you're interested in working with me, I do offer free consultation through video call, just for you to meet me, because remember, the therapeutic relationship is the single most important thing. So I want people to meet me without having to pay before they decide that they want to invest in this. And you can conveniently schedule all of that through my website. You can literally, there's a link on my website where you can view my availability in real time. You can just book directly on your own. You don't have to wait for me to respond back to you. You did have some questions. Usually I designate the consultation session for that, but you can also email me too. Email is honestly like the best way to get a hold of me. So I would recommend that. And my Instagram handle is also linked on my website.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivera. And for my
Thank you so
listeners,
much for
everything will be
having me.
Of course. I would definitely love to have you back. This
Yeah, we'll send
conversation
it.
can keep going.
Oh, yeah.
But for my listeners, all of those links will be in the bio. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, go check her out. Go follow her on Instagram. Go support the YouTube, all that jazz. And I hope y'all have an amazing day.
Bye. Thank you so much.